this animator that works on Boruto, 2 Blue Vortex. So, I mean, he will be working on Boruto. He's an animator at Studio Pierott, or Pierott, however you say that. And he claims that Boruto 2 Blue Vortex is so serious that there seems to be no room for original anime content, aka what everybody calls filler, just so generally, right? Which I'll get into detail a little bit. I have a bigger video probably I wanted to make. I had it planned and written out a little bit slightly, like a couple of notes and bullet points on my phone for like a while. Never did it. But everybody misuses the word filler when it's referring to anime. So we have a general new definition and understanding of what people mean when they're referring to filler. But it's not specifically what filler actually is as a literary, word being used in this world, right? So this studio, if you didn't know, Studio Pierrot is the same studio that has done Bleach, okay? Both the Thousand Year Blood War and the original Bleach. Now, before I get into what that previous animator statement about the filler, quote unquote, means and what it will mean for Boruto and how it affects other animes, right? Let me just mention how Bleach, okay, it's been one of the anime that have really benefited from having a beautiful animation boost in these recent times. And Bleach also, upon his resurrection, has come out with a pretty good schedule, okay? They've broken the anime up into different cores and they've released it in packages. Something that a lot of famous and big anime, especially in the past, didn't really have. Like, we seen Dragon Ball Super come back. When Dragon Ball came back, Dragon Ball Super aired, and it was continuously airing over the whole year or years that it was airing, basically. It had like short breaks, but nothing really long. No seasons that were split up really in large chunks. Like when we have to wait for the second season of Fire Force or, Demon Slayer, One Punch Man, all the other shit, right? So animes like Dragon Ball Super and Black Clover, even One Piece at one point, they were all suffering under this kind of quality and production curse. So when Boruto comes back, that's also kind of what he's referring to. When Boruto comes back, like, albeit I don't think that Boruto's second part exactly is the best written stuff ever, but there is a lot going on plot-wise and, a lot of fights back-to-back, stuff like that. So as far as that goes, well, not a lot of fights, maybe I'm over-exaggerating, but as far as that goes, this is why he's saying there's no time for anime original content. And if you're wondering earlier why I drew a line between filler and, what he's saying here, original anime content, it's because a lot of times people don't understand the difference between the two, the small difference. And because there is a difference. Almost everybody misuses the word filler. Everybody actually in general, they all misuse the word filler when referring to anime. So now we have a new general definition and understanding of what people mean when referring to filler and referring to anime, okay? When they say the word filler referring to anime. So this is not really exactly what filler would mean when you're referring to it in other literary works and stuff like that. We have filler in dialogue. There's filler dialogue in books, and there's filler scenes in actual works of fiction written by the person who originally wrote it. So for example, Oda in his manga, in a specific arc of One Piece, filler can exist in Oda's own arc of One Piece, because this is what filler really is. But people kind of restrict filler to what they perceive as non-canon anime content. Filler, the word in and of itself, does not just mean non-canon. These two things are not mutually exclusive, okay? A lot of filler have ruined shows, and they have only existed because the source content material or the writing has stopped or left a big enough gap to where the anime needs to, they need content. They need to fill in that space before the original source picks back up. So as far as anime filler goes, so we're going to keep using the definition all of you guys have, right? So filler for people is just non-canon, right? Real filler isn't just non-canon stuff. They don't understand the term. It's a tool restricted. It's not a tool or a term or a word restricted to the use of manga and anime. Okay, it's a part of literature as a whole in general. They could be good filler, they could be bad filler in any medium. Even a book like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings have filler inside of them. Believe it or not, I'm telling you, you're here right now. You're gonna learn it right here. Okay. If we were to use One Piece as an example, like I was just using earlier, because that's one of those anime where people kind of argue all the time about what's filler and what's not filler in One Piece. Because, well, for example, right, in One Piece, if Oda himself has drawn a story or scene play out with, let's say, and bear with me, let's say Luffy jumps in the air with his right foot, leaps up in the air, punches Kaido in the face, gets behind him with lightning speed, so it's like he teleports, instant transmission, kicks Kaido in the back of the head, and then elbows him and knocks Kaido to the ground, and Kaido's KO'd, right? Now bear with me, that's going to make sense in a second. Bear with me. No sequence of events happening panel by panel, frame by frame. Oda drew that, right? This is canon. This is the true source. Now, if the anime then goes and draws the same fight, so Luffy jumps in the air with the same right foot, he leaps up, punches Kaido in the face, but before he throws that kick, Kaido gets dizzy, and we see him get dizzy, and he tries to wake up and swing at Luffy, and Luffy dodges all of those punches and then parries Kaido's last punch, and then throws that kick, and then ends him with the same elbow to the knockout in the ground. That little inclusion of those extra small steps in between that fight would constitute as filler for some people. For most people, that's filler. That's not how filler works. That is not what filler is. Okay? That is not what filler is. So a lot of times when what people refer to as filler when it's coming to these arcs, these large arcs or some side story of like, yeah, well, it is filler, but it's also just a non-canon anime original story. It's anime original content, okay? Like that, like the phrase earlier from the animator used. It's anime original content. It's not exactly just filler. There might be filler in this anime original content, but if you want to get technical, right? Like I said, they're not mutually exclusive. So this thing we're calling filler, let's use the arc of One Piece, for example, like the Davy Longback shit, right? Or some of the other ones. I don't know, pick one. Pick any of those One Piece arcs. Or if you're more familiar with Naruto, I'll pick a Naruto arc for you, right? The Power arc, when Naruto was fighting, and Guy and they were all fighting the other fake Nine Tails dude, right? So these are not just filler. These are anime original stories, anime original episodes, okay? It might be filler inside of them because it's filler inside of, like I said earlier, there would be filler existing inside of Kishimoto, the original author's work too, right? That's just how it works. Filler would exist inside of the original work as well, by the definition of filler. It is not exclusive to an anime, okay? Or what you just think is always just useless in what's happening, right? And what I mean by that is, yes, filler generally is something that is disconnected from the main plot. It doesn't progress anything moving forward, okay? It doesn't progress any of the world building. It doesn't have any exposition that is relevant to anything in the plot or story or any characters, like future developments. That it was what filler would be. So if you look at those arcs I just mentioned in the anime, are they filler in a way? Yes, but also within and of themselves, the story that's being told is not an entire filler story. The story is canon. So yes, it will be specifically filler and non-canon. Okay, so there are a bunch of events there for leisure time and padding, not adding to any of the extra depth of the writing or anything else. But what if the filler, quote unquote, that have serious stories? Okay, within and of themselves, they're not adding to the overall series. So that's why it's non-canon. But the contents within and of itself of this episode of this arc contained is not filler, because what's happening is relevant to its own self-contained story or plot, like I just mentioned, would be that it's a non-canon story or plot, though. So yes, it's filler and non-canon. So people misuse that word, and we just have to understand. We just know now what people are referring to when they say this is filler, that's filler. But it gets out of hand when people start to call anything and everything filler, okay, and non-canon. So we know that Studio Pierrot is very trustworthy when it comes to animating and how good they are at animating. But they had that problem with filler in the past, especially with the first part of Boruto. It says containing a whopping 70% of filler episodes, which, by the way, for Boruto, a lot of those non-canon episodes are, this is filler, right? It's filler, it's non-canon. So, like I said, the word filler has become synonymous with non-canon for a lot of people. But originally, I guess that's my main point, right? If what I said earlier didn't make sense to you, the word filler has become synonymous with non-canon. But that is not the definition of filler. Filler does not always mean a non-canon, because like I said earlier, the man who wrote Lord of the Rings could write filler. He can have filler within his own canon story. So canon works and canon writings can have filler for a 100% fact, okay? It doesn't work really any other way. So canon works can have filler inside of them existing within and throughout the story. Oda, let's go back to One Piece, the current Elbaf arc. Their filler can exist in Elbaf, especially within dialogue. When the dialogue is not particularly referencing or referring or aiding or progressing or adding to any of the story points, character development, plots, so on and so forth. Like I said earlier, this would be filler dialogue. Yes, it is, 100%. Okay, like when characters say but words like that even that small thing, that's filler. Okay, characters just talking about something that doesn't really have any relevance. You might say, oh, but it's adding to the characters' development because we're learning more about them. We didn't really learn anything about them. They're just interacting. Okay, they didn't progress, they didn't change, they didn't get a new insight. They're not now, their personalities aren't slightly changing, or they didn't learn something about themselves to become better. None of that's happening. They're just talking. It's filler dialogue. It's filler. Okay, everything needs a filler. Okay, you shouldn't be scared of it. But as the Boruto anime's potentially understanding is that when it comes down to a work where it's already enough going on, you don't need this extra original anime content surrounding it, because he didn't use the word filler, and it's technically not filler that he's referring to, because there still will be filler existing there. But as far as what we call filler, it's not going to be there. Okay, what we call filler, what as anime fans, it's not going to be there. Okay, we're not going to see some episode of Boruto, stalking some guy in the village because he stole somebody's like headband, and he some random bullshit. Konohamaru going to eat lemon burgers. We're not going to see shit like that. The filler that we will see would be additional moments of characters having levity or something like that probably just weren't added. Like, we could have some extra shit of Boruto just showing us like him chilling or relaxing in his mind frame, or not even his mind frame, like, because then if it went too deep, it wouldn't be filler anymore, right? It could just be him just walking around, like it's setting the tone for the show. That's not really adding to the story or anything like that. The tone's already there. They're just extra shots. Okay, it could be, like I said earlier, extra scene of like an additional fight extension that's not technically filler, but people are gonna call it filler because it wasn't in the manga. Okay, so there's all sorts of shit like that, and I think that a lot of people, like I said, will see those sorts of fight scenes happen. They're gonna cry about something. I think